Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, I'm Casey, and every single week I post a new video on a lesser known missing person case that needs more attention. As always, I mean absolutely no harm in doing these videos. I am simply trying to spread awareness and get these cases some more exposure. Today's video is on a case that I have followed for a very long time. I actually remember watching the story on America's Most Wanted way back when I was still a teenager, and it's the story of the disappearance of Teekah Lewis. Saturday evening, January 23rd of 1999 was a super busy night at the New Frontier Lanes bowling alley, located at 4702 South Center Street in Tacoma, Washington. It was league night, and the establishment, which contained 32 bowling lanes, a bar, and a restaurant, and a little nook area with arcade games, was packed with both adults and children. Included in the crowd were 2-year-old Teekah Lewis, her mother, Teresa English Lewis, and around a dozen of their family members and friends. The group had been able to get 2 bowling lanes that night, lanes 7 and 8, despite it being so busy, and they were bowling, talking, just having a good time. 2-year-old Tikka, who was dressed in a green Tweety Bird sweatshirt, white sweatpants, and black and white Nike Air Jordan sneakers, was a very shy little toddler. She was wary of anyone she wasn't familiar with and always stayed close by her mother's side. She was one of those kids that didn't allow even certain family members to pick her up. If it wasn't her mom or her sister or her babysitter, she wasn't having it. She was a mama's girl, and under the watchful eye of her mother, Tikka was running around the arcade area of the bowling alley that night. Her uncle had given her some quarters for the games, and she carried a few of them along with some Starburst candies, which were her favorite, and a little clear purse with a fish on it. Her uncle had also won a stuffed animal for her from one of the claw machines, and Tikka, being the sweet, caring little girl that she was, had given the toy to her 10-month-old baby sister. Around 10:15 p.m., little Tikka was sitting in the seat of the Cruisin' World racing game, doing the thing where little ones move the steering wheel and they think they're really playing even though their little legs can't reach the pedals. Her mom, Teresa, told Tikka to stay put for a second, and she stepped away for what was maybe a mere 15 seconds to watch her brother bowl. She was literally 10 feet or less away from Tikka, but when she looked back over to where her daughter had been sitting, Tikka was no longer there. Teresa rushed back over to where her daughter had been, probably thinking the toddler had just gotten up and moved on to another game that had gotten her attention. But when she looked around, she didn't see Tikka anywhere. She began looking between, under, and behind the games in the arcade, but she still didn't see her. Teresa checked the women's bathroom in case the toddler had wandered in there, but again, no Tikka. One of Teresa's cousins happened to be in the bathroom at that time, changing her child's diaper, but she told Teresa Tikka hadn't come in there either. There was an exit door leading out to the parking lot, only about 6 feet away from the arcade games, and though Teresa doubted her daughter would have been able to push the heavy door on her own and willingly gone out in the dark and the cold, she opened the door to see if Tikka had somehow managed to go outside. She screamed her daughter's name out into the night, but got no response, and again, didn't see Tikka. She rushed back inside to the bowling alley. She was, of course, absolutely frantic by now, and she was able to find the off-duty officer that was working as a security guard for the bowling alley that evening. He helped her look and began making announcements over the intercom, informing people that, hey, we have a missing child in the building, but it was so loud in there, not everyone heard it. Even some of the people that did hear it just kept on with their bowling game. I guess they figured she was hiding somewhere and would be found, and they just didn't see the urgency. All of the family members, some of the bowling alley employees, and a few others did stop what they were doing to help look. They searched every nook and cranny in the entire bowling alley, even areas that only the employees were allowed to go, but with no luck. Tacoma Police were called and were on the scene immediately helping in the search. So Tikka disappeared around 10:15. Cops were there on site a little after 10:30, so only about 15 minutes after the toddler was last seen. Officers joined the family in searching the entire inside and outside of the building, hoping maybe she was hiding, had gotten stuck somewhere, or perhaps she had wandered off and was just lost in the sea of people that were there. Or perchance she had gotten outside somehow and lost her way in the dark. Now, the Amber Alert was a thing back in 1999, but not in Tacoma yet, so no alert was issued. Amber Alerts started in 1996, but not in every state. It didn't go nationwide until, I believe it was 2005. Over 300 patrons that were at New Frontier Lanes that night were interviewed, and some were talked to by police more than once. No one recalled seeing or hearing Tikka scream, which she likely would have had someone she didn't know tried to grab her up. But I remind you, it was loud in there. Imagine the noise in there that night. 350 plus people talking and yelling, beer bottles clinking, 32 bowling lanes all booked with balls rolling and pins crashing, music playing. They probably had TVs in there too that were blaring. I have no doubt all those sounds could easily block out the sound of a child crying or even screaming out. Now, there are different accounts of how people were questioned and vehicles in the parking lot were searched that night. Police did block off the parking lot and were searching the vehicles that were exiting, checking their trunks, just making sure no one was trying to sneak the little girl out in their car. There have been people that were there that night, though, that have said their cars were never searched, and although they saw police out in the parking lot that night as they were leaving, they had no idea what was going on or that police were looking for a missing child. Law enforcement didn't find Tikka in any of the vehicles they searched, and they continued looking for her all throughout the night and into the next day. Because the missing individual was a child, the FBI got involved along with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They searched, I believe it was a 1 or 2 mile radius of that bowling alley. They combed the thickly wooded area nearby, along with all the surrounding neighborhoods. Explorer scouts joined in the effort and went door to door, showing Tikka's photo and asking if anyone had seen her or had any information. The search dogs were brought out. Helicopters with infrared cameras, which can detect people by the body heat they give off, were used. Volunteers were on foot and scouring the area on all-terrain vehicles. They still didn't find any sign of Tikka. Her clothes, a shoe, her purse, nothing. Since nothing was found, they realized it was more likely she had been taken and not wandered off on her own. Local sex offenders were looked into, and they were even bringing cadaver dogs to the offenders' homes just in case one of them had something to do with Tikka's abduction and had harmed and disposed of her. But they didn't find anything and didn't find any evidence that any of them had something to do with it. 3 days after Tikka disappeared, law enforcement did find something during their search, or rather the sniffer dogs found it. In a vacant lot across the street from the bowling alley, rolled up and hidden in some bushes, were a navy blue wool pea coat with the initials IS or JS written on the tag, off-white Lee brand jeans, and a Columbia brand button-down plaid shirt. Now, these pieces of clothing were not believed to have been hidden there for very long because they didn't have any mold or mildew on them. They looked like they had been put there pretty recently. They were kept as evidence, even though law enforcement wasn't sure if they were connected, in any way to what happened to Tikka. I want to know more about the clothing. Was it ever tested for DNA? Do they still have them locked up in an evidence room somewhere? If so, can they test them again to see if it matches anyone in CODIS, the DNA database? I'm really interested in what all testing was done on the clothing. Unfortunately, the New Frontier Lanes bowling alley did not have any indoor or outdoor security surveillance cameras, but police did try to get surveillance footage from other businesses nearby. They also asked anyone who had been in the bowling alley that night to give police any pictures or any camcorder footage that they may have taken, but no one seemed to have any. As usual, when investigating a missing case, they have to look at those closest to the person first, but family members cooperated fully and were fairly quickly ruled out as suspects. There were plenty of people there to back up Teresa's account of what happened, And Teresa voluntarily took not one, but 2 polygraph tests. From what I understand, the reason she was given 2 tests was because they had more questions that they needed to ask her that hadn't been asked in the first one. But she passed both, and other family members that had been there that night volunteered to take tests as well. Teekah's father, Robert Lewis, was ruled out as having any involvement because at the time Teekah disappeared, he was in jail serving a 4-year sentence at McNeil Island Corrections for theft. So obviously he wouldn't have been able to kidnap his daughter. Being locked up is a pretty solid alibi, and also from what I could tell, he and Teekah's mother Teresa didn't have any issues with each other. They had 2 children together, and they weren't fighting over custody or anything else. Now, they did receive a couple of leads from patrons of the bowling alley. One woman reported seeing a dark-colored, possibly maroon, but it was too dark out to really see the color, late 80s or early 90s Pontiac Grand Am with dark tinted windows and a big spoiler on the back of it. This vehicle was speeding out of the parking lot, like squealing tires and fishtailing it out of there in a hurry. Around the same time, Tikka came up missing. Police did put out a be on the lookout for this car, and they checked the Washington State Motor Vehicle Database, but they have never been able to find the car or link anyone to it. Like I said before, some people that were in attendance at Frontier Lanes that night had no idea a child had even disappeared, and they didn't find out until they saw on the news days later. One of them was a teenage boy around 17 years old, and he called police to tell them what he had seen. The teen had been walking toward the restrooms when this guy, out of nowhere, bumped into him, kind of like shoulder checked him, and just kept going without apologizing or anything. The man, who appeared to be in his 30s, was wearing a blue plaid shirt and faded jeans. He was about 5'11" tall, a bit burly, with brown curly hair about shoulder length, a thick mustache, a big nose, and a heavily pockmarked, acne-scarred face. The man was holding the hand of Tikka. The man holding Tikka's hand was white, but since Tikka was mixed race, the teenager just thought it was a father hurrying his child to the restroom. Besides thinking this dude was really flippin' rude, he didn't think much else of it until he saw Tikka's sweet little dimpled face on the news. For some reason, investigators only talked to the teen the one time back in January of 1999. They never followed up with him again, and they just kind of shoved that bit of information into a folder to be forgotten. A week after Tikka disappeared, America's Most Wanted was filming a reenactment at the bowling alley. There were multiple people standing around, observing everything going on, and one person called police to report a guy that had been there also watching, and the witness thought the dude seemed suspicious and was just acting weird. They described this man as having brown curly hair, a mustache, and a pock-marked face. Now, this person who called in had no idea that the teenage boy had previously reported seeing a guy with that same description leading Tikka somewhere, because police didn't seem to think it was important apparently, and that info hadn't been released. On November 29th of 1998, around 2 months before Tikka went missing, there was an incident at New Frontier Lanes in which a 4-year-old boy had been at the bowling alley with his dad, and the boy had gone to the restroom by himself after playing in the arcade, and while in there, he was sexually assaulted. Another patron of the bowling alley had walked in and found the poor little guy lying on the floor of one of the bathroom stalls. The man who did this vile and disgusting act to him was described as a Caucasian man with curly brown hair and a beard, and he was wearing a baseball cap. For some reason, the bowling alley nor the father of the boy called police that day. Why would you not report this? I seriously had to read that article over and over because I could believe a business maybe wouldn't want something like that reported because they didn't want to taint their image, but what about the parent? I would want police to find the perp, and I myself would want to beat him to a pulp. Maybe the dad thought the bowling alley called cops, maybe the bowling alley workers thought the dad called, but if you didn't see police there that night, right after, and police weren't speaking with you, wouldn't you assume maybe you better pick up the phone? The father did call police the next day and did file a report, but I don't know why in the world he waited a whole day. Now, about a week after that little boy was attacked and likely traumatized for life, a 6-year-old boy was playing by himself in the arcade area of the bowling alley. His mom was periodically checking on him, but letting him kind of do his own thing. And once, when she went to check, she saw a man holding her son's hand and telling others standing around that he was the boy's dad. He obviously wasn't, and the mom understandably flipped out on him and notified the bowling alley employees. Now, the security guards escorted the man out, but do you think the police were called? Nope. No call to police, no report filed, no holding the perp there until police could arrive, nothing. Just slap the guy's hand and send him on his way, I guess. Can you even freaking imagine walking up to see some random stranger saying they are your child's parent while holding your kid's hand and trying to lure them away? Hell no. I would have gone full mama bear, ripped them to shreds, complete and utter violent freak out mode. Probably would have gotten arrested myself, but it would have been worth it. I would make sure they thought twice about ever grabbing any child ever again. So after Tikka disappeared, someone informed police about this happening with the 6-year-old, and they contacted the boy's mom to find out details, and she didn't know a police report hadn't been filed. Wouldn't you wonder why police hadn't talked to you? I don't know. These people not calling the cops, I don't understand it. Now, there was yet another incident the very same day Tikka disappeared. A man tried to take 2 kids from Oakland Madrona Park, which is close to the bowling alley. Very close. I believe the park was like a half-mile away. The 2 kids were there playing and had gone to the restroom by themselves, and the dad looked over and saw a Caucasian man with brown hair wearing a baseball cap near the bathroom trying to lure the kids away. The man fled in a blue 1995 Pontiac Grand Am when the father of the 2 kids chased him. So the guy got away, which I think means he probably had his car nearby and running to make a quick escape. I believe he was planning to snatch those 2 kids and take off. The father did report this to police, but not immediately. He didn't report it until after he heard about Tikka's disappearance on the news, so 3 days had gone by. Again, what is with these people not reporting this stuff, especially when it involves their kids? Now, the way I see it, the Pontiac, the white, brown-haired, pockmarked man, the car, and the guy seem to be connected to all of the incidents, including Tikka's disappearance. Could this all be a coincidence and each dude was someone different? Of course. But what I just can't seem to get over is if it was the same man, had just one of those previous incidents at the bowling alley or the park, had they been reported? If the bowling alley workers or one of the parents called police immediately when these offenses occurred, this guy may have been caught, and Tikka may still be with her family today. That's just my personal view on it, and I also believe that this person that took Tikka knew there were no cameras in the bowling alley. They went there looking for a child. They were likely watching Tikka and waiting for her mother to become distracted, and they saw an opportunity and they snatched her up. Boom, gone. Do I blame Teresa, Tikka's mom? No, I don't. If you say to me that you as a parent have never gotten sidetracked and taken your eyes off your kid for a minute, I would have a hard time believing you. We as parents are not perfect. Unfortunately, there are predators out there that look for those parental weaknesses or flaws and pounce when we're distracted and it's least expected. In 2006, a Dallas private investigator located a little girl he thought might be Tikka. The little girl looked a lot like her and she was examined, but she didn't have a birthmark on her bottom like Tikka had. They did a DNA test to be completely positive that it wasn't her, and the little girl was not Teekah. In 2009, Teekah's pictures were put on semi-trucks as part of the Homeward Bound program, which was a joint program between the Washington State Patrol and Gordon. They put pictures of missing children on the trucks along with their information. These trucks drove all over the United States, so it was a way to get Teekah's face and the faces of other missing children seen. In 2010, a man came up to Teresa at, I believe it was one of the candlelight vigils. He told her he had a vision and believed Teekah's remains were buried in Point Defiance Park. Point Defiance Park is only about 6 miles from the bowling alley. The guy made Teresa feel pretty uneasy. She probably thought it was weird he would just walk up and tell her that instead of telling the proper authorities. But Teresa did inform police, and they did dig up a small area of the park, but they didn't find anything pertaining to Teekah. In July of 2012, detectives searched a home in Tacoma belonging to a man named John William Black. He was allegedly at New Frontier Lanes the night Teekah vanished, and he had pleaded guilty to attempting to lure a 3-year-old child away in October of 2010 at the Tower Lanes bowling alley, which is also in Tacoma. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and they did alert to something in his backyard. His yard was dug up, but again, nothing was found. He denied having any involvement in Teekah's disappearance, and I believe he was eventually cleared as a suspect. At one point, there was a piece of property by the bowling alley where they were preparing the land to build, and the police kept a close eye during this because they thought it was a good possibility that Teekah's remains would be found during the excavating process, but nothing turned up. In 2020, 20 years after Teekah went missing, a cold case detective named Stephen Riopel was taking another look at Teekah's case. He was going through some of the case files that had been seemingly forgotten when he came across the witness account given by the teenager back in 1999 and the information given by the other witness that described a man with the same description watching the reenactment. While previous investigators didn't seem to see the importance of this information about the man with the brown hair and pockmarked face, Detective Riopel did. He contacted the teen, who was now a grown man, and his account of that night was the same as it had been back in 1999. The description of the pockmarked man was released to the media, and police were hoping that anyone would remember seeing the man that night at New Frontier Lanes so many years ago and be able to give them a name, but he is still unidentified. It's been over 2 decades since little Teekah disappeared, and detectives have received more than 700 tips. They've followed up on each one and still don't know what happened to her that night. Teresa has never given up trying to find her child. She has held a candlelight vigil for Teekah every single year on the anniversary of her disappearance to honor the little girl and also make sure people in the community don't forget. Every January 23rd, family, friends, and supporters gather in the parking lot where New Frontier Lanes once stood, even though the bowling alley was torn down in 2002 and a Home Depot is there now. They also get together every 4th of July to celebrate Teekah's birthday. Teresa has never given up on finding her daughter and advocating for her. Teekah's maternal grandmother, Mary, was by Teresa's side helping to spread awareness on Teekah's disappearance. Mary put missing posters and flyers with Teekah's face on them all over her van, making sure that wherever she went, every place she traveled to, people would know that Teekah was still missing. Sadly, Mary passed away in 2018 without ever knowing what happened to her granddaughter. If Tikka is alive today, she is 24 years old, and she's not going to remember what happened to her. She was only 2 when she was abducted. If she wasn't harmed and has been raised by another person, another family, that is going to be all she's ever known. She is not going to know that she's a missing child. It's going to be up to someone to recognize her and question her background, where she came from, because the person that took her is not going to say, hey, guess what? I abducted you when you were a baby and just decided to keep you. Very low probability they're going to tell her anything. I hope that this is what happened and that she was brought up by someone in a loving, caring home, someone that just wanted a child. But there is that possibility that Tikka was taken and harmed. I don't think the perp that took her is the only one that knows about it either. I really don't. Maybe he didn't tell anyone what he did, but I bet people close to him suspect it. And how they could keep quiet, I'll never understand. 21 years later, this guy probably looks a little different than he did in 1999, but he's still got those pockmarks. He's described as white, 30 to 40 years old in 99, so he would be in his 50s or 60s now. Curly brown hair, a mustache, and those pockmarks on his face. Pockmarks don't go away. I have a couple on my face from when I was a teen, and here I am at almost 41, and those two pockmarks are still there. They don't disappear. If you know this guy, or you think you do, please let police know. Just let them check into it. It's not fair that he's gotten away with ripping a child from her family and leaving them to suffer with the unknown for all of these years. I was just talking with one of my subscribers in the comment section of my last video, and we were talking about times we had briefly lost sight of our kids in a store, or in her case it was a mall, mine was in the store, and that absolutely terrible feeling of panic you feel. You want to find your child and you want to find them now. The worst possible scenarios are racing through your mind, but we were lucky. Our children came back to us within seconds or even a few minutes. My daughter was hiding in the middle of one of those circular clothing racks and ignoring me when I yelled for her, but she finally came out. My subscriber's daughter was able to find a mall security guard to help her return to her mom. We only had to feel that terrible gut-wrenching panic for a short period of time. Tikka's parents have lived with that feeling for over 21 years. Never knowing what happened to their daughter and not getting to see their sweet baby girl grow up, lose her first tooth, go to prom, graduate, be happy, not get to see what a beautiful, amazing person Tikka could grow up to be. Tikka is half African American and half Native American, with brown eyes and black hair with natural red highlights. At the time of her disappearance, her hair was in ponytails. She was 3 feet tall and 35 pounds. She was last seen wearing a green Tweety Bird sweatshirt, white sweatpants, and black and white Nike Air Jordans. Her ears were pierced. She had facial dimples. She has a quarter-size birthmark on her buttocks and had skin discoloration on her face caused by eczema. She also had asthma and required medication and breathing treatments. She would be 24 years old today. If you have any information on Tikka's whereabouts, what happened to her that night, or if you can identify the individual with the pockmarked face, please contact Tacoma Police at 253-798-4721 or call into Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Thank you all so much for watching. Please share Tikka's flyer. As always, it is linked in the description box along with the Help Find Missing Teekah Lewis Facebook page and all of my sources. I will also have a GoFundMe linked that the family has set up to raise money to hire a new private investigator if you are able to donate. Share this video if you think it will help, and if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It's free to do and it helps me to know that these cases are being seen. I would also highly suggest checking out my entire missing playlist. Should be up there right now, as each case I cover is super important and deserves more exposure. Special shout out to my daughter Avery for shooting some arcade footage for me for this video. I appreciate her doing that, and I appreciate all of you for being here. Please keep Tikka's family in your prayers. Someone out there knows what happened to Tikka. Perhaps even someone watching this video. So, will you be the one who looks away or the one who does something about it? I'll see you all next week.